So I'll go a little off script because I got a chance to look at your testimony. Intro number 351 with regards to rechargeable batteries, particularly e-bike batteries. I know that this requires state action. I believe last year, or maybe it's this year, honestly, time is escaping me right now, but I'm pretty sure the council passed a resolution asking the state really to include the e-bike batteries in its exchange program or as part of the kind of EPR that already exists. And we agree, like, we want the state to take action, but I think hopefully when that happens, that's, that will complement what the bill intends to do, but we still need to create a network of disposable sites for these e-bike batteries, given how they have proliferated in the city and how much damage they're causing. I don't think there's enough education. I know education is this constant need for education around everything around waste, but I think in particular, this issue is really deadly. I know the council has really tried to take action on it. There's just needs to be a saturation of systems to collect this information and also let people know the dangers of it. So, I'm open to hearing any feedback, but I completely agree that really the state needs to take action, and then we also just need a network. The garages aren't enough. The one-off events are not enough. Council members paying for e-waste events with discretionary funding is just not enough. We really need a e-bike disposable site per community district or something like that, because there's just too many on the street, and it's dangerous. The single-use plastic study, this was a bill that was requested when I first came in by advocates. I got single-use on my desk right here. It's all around us. I agree that some of this can be captured in the waste characterization study. I would love to hear a little bit more today in the conversation, like how exactly that's captured in terms of the pervasiveness of it. Agree, this is also where the state needs to kick in. Really wish the state would find the courage to pass the packaging reduction, the EPR version of this at the state level. And hopefully we can do it this year, and maybe the plastics industry will get out of the way for everybody's sake. But would love to see how the waste characterization study actually can really do what the bill wants it to do, so that we can actually try to pinpoint areas of intervention. And then the waste characterization study, that was in collaboration with you all, so we would love to see it move forward. But I think one other piece that has come up in conversation with people that I've had is the commercial waste, if there's ability to capture that in the study as well. So yeah, just looking forward to the conversation. As always, want to work in collaboration. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Nurse. I would also like to recognize Councilmember Vernikov, who's joined us. I would like to thank everyone on my team and in the legislative division for their work drafting this legislation and preparing for today's oversight hearing. I would also like to begin with the testimony from the Department of Sanitation, followed by council member questions. We will then move to testimony by members of the public, starting with in-person attendees, followed by those testifying on Zoom. I will now turn it over to the committee counsel to administer the oath.
Good morning. My name is Morgan Barrett, Committee Counsel for the Sanitation and Solid Waste Committee at the New York City Council. Can you please raise your right hands? Do you affirm to tell the whole truth and to answer council member questions honestly? Thank you. You may begin your testimony when ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Abreu and members of the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. Thank you for acknowledging the tragic loss of sanitation worker Richard Errico, a 19-year veteran of the Sanitation Department who was killed in the performance of his duties this past weekend. All of New York's strongest are in mourning, and we appreciate the words of support that have come from all corners of the city. I'm Joshua Goodman, Deputy Commissioner of Public Affairs and Customer Experience at the Department of Sanitation. I'm joined today by Jennifer McDonald, Assistant Commissioner of Solid Waste Management, and by Kate Kitchener, Director of the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability. Every day, 24 million pounds of waste go from the curb and into the white trucks of the Sanitation Department. If observing life in New York City is the greatest show on earth, then New York's strongest are its most dazzling performers, making the bags and bales of material disappear from our streets and sidewalks like master magicians. But we all know that the rabbit doesn't really vanish inside the hat, and the waste, our waste, produced by 8.5 million New Yorkers, including you and me and everyone in this room, doesn't just go away either. Most of it is either sent to waste-to-energy facilities in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or upstate, where it becomes heat and power for homes, or to landfills in Virginia, South Carolina, and elsewhere, where it can sit indefinitely and become nothing. DSNY does not accept this as an inevitability, and the diversion of waste to differing forms of beneficial reuse has been part of our strategic planning for the department's entire history, at least from the first contract to produce fertilizer, grease, and soap out of garbage on Barron Island in Brooklyn in 1896. Today, those waste diversion plans are far more advanced and proceeding at a far quicker pace. The Commercial Waste Zone program, now being implemented in the first of the 20 zones, provides the first meaningful financial incentive for commercial diversion, with the collection of recyclable and compostable material both costing businesses less money than the collection of trash. I would like to take this opportunity, as DSNY has done at 3 previous hearings, to again raise the issue of commercial organic separation. Local Law 146 of 2013 requires certain commercial establishments to separate their compostable material, but this law is now substantially out of step with the city's commitment to the diversion of compostable waste. While the commercial waste zone system will improve commercial diversion, we also urge the council to consider an update that would allow DSNY to require source separation at all commercial establishments, in line with the progress made in residential diversion. Earlier this year, the Adams administration completed a promised expansion of composting to all New York City public schools, keeping material out of landfill and training the next generation of composters. In 2019, school food waste collection programs diverted approximately 16 million pounds of material from landfill. In 2023, that number was over 35 million, and in 2024 to date, with months left to go, it is already over 38 million pounds. On the residential side, the FY 2024 Mayor's Management Report reported the 3rd straight year in which the diversion rate increased. That means that the total share of waste kept out of landfills and waste-to-energy facilities is up every year thus far under this administration. Again, every year under this administration, the diversion rate for waste has increased. The MMR also showed an incredible data point within overall diversion. The amount of compostable material saved from landfill has increased 65% over the last 2 years to an astounding 260 million pounds. This is because New York City is now home to the largest, easiest to use curbside composting program ever, a program that goes citywide in less than 2 weeks. The culmination of more than a decade of advocacy and policy development, including by many people in the room today. This is a vindication of simple, customer-forward programs for waste diversion. It is all too easy for those of us who care deeply about waste diversion and environmental justice to forget that whether right or wrong, it is not always at top of mind for busy, hardworking New Yorkers. Everyone wants to do the right thing, but it has to be easy. And we've taken steps through policy design and through the use of new technologies to make it easy. So please, recycle or compost your pizza box. Don't worry that it has a little grease on it. We will take care of it. Recycle the peanut butter jar. Don't worry that there's still some peanut butter residue left inside. We will take care of it. Recycle that plastic container regardless of what number is on the bottom. We will take care of it on our end. When you put your compost bin out on your recycling day, feel free to line it with a clear plastic bag if you want to. We will take care of that too. Complicated rules, sign-up requirements, restrictions, exceptions, all of that makes it more likely that reusable or recyclable material just goes in the trash. And wouldn't that be a shame? With that focus on universality and ease of use around diversion programs, I'll now turn to the bills on today's agenda. Intro 256, sponsored by Councilmember Hudson, would require the department to study the feasibility and potential environmental effects of a recycling mandate for household textiles. We strongly support the goal of textile waste diversion, and as such, we're currently studying textile diversion options as part of our solid waste management plan, due to be completed in 2026. The department also has a successful, although relatively small, voluntary textile recycling program, Refashion NYC. We would welcome the council's partnership and outreach around expanding that program, which operates at no cost to the city. Given our existing program and studies already underway, the bill as written and the study it mandates are unnecessary at this time. I would also note that businesses whose waste stream is more than 10% textiles are already required to recycle them per DSNY rule, and that is a very significant amount of the total textile waste produced citywide. Intro 351, sponsored by Councilmember Nurse, would require DSNY to develop a plan for ensuring proper disposal of rechargeable batteries used for powered mobility devices. These batteries present a major problem for DSNY, causing fires in our trucks and facilities when they are improperly disposed of. DSNY already complies with certain portions of this law. We have one special waste drop-off site that accepts these items in each borough, open 1 day per week, whereas the law calls for 2 sites per borough, open 7 days per week. Adding a second site per borough and making both sites operational every day would cost an estimated $7,721,000 per year. The law also calls for DSNY to accept these items at any disposal or collection event organized by the department. While we do accept them at our SAFE events, currently funded at 1 per borough per year, it would be unsafe and impractical to collect them at all department-sponsored events, which is what the law requires as written. For example, accepting lithium-ion batteries at a compost give-back event would not be feasible. For the third and fourth requirements of the bill as it's currently written, mandating coordination with businesses and outreach with the public, we would point out that many rechargeable batteries are already covered by a New York State mandated drop-off program, where all stores that sell rechargeable batteries or items that include them must accept them for recycling, but that, as the council member pointed out, the current law exempts e-mobility batteries. Given the cost of establishing new sites, expanding the hours of current sites, and adding hazardous waste material recovery to unrelated events, as well as the existing state infrastructure around work with businesses and the public for other battery types, we believe that the best plan for getting this hazardous item out of the waste stream is to close that state loophole and add e-mobility batteries to the existing state take-back law, which is funded by battery manufacturers. The next bill on the agenda today, Intro 695, also sponsored by Councilmember Nurse, calls for a study of single-use plastics. This council has made substantial progress on the issue of single-use plastics, particularly with the passage of Local Law 17 of 2023, the Skip the Stuff Act. Enforcement of this law only just began this summer, and given both that and the fact that we currently study the reality of single-use plastics as part of our waste characterization efforts, a new study is premature. If the goal is a broader study of single-use plastics in context and their impact on environmental justice communities, we believe that one of our sister agencies would be better suited to lead that kind of impact analysis, and we support the bill if it is in the right place. And the final bill, Intro 697, sponsored by Councilmember Nurse as well, renews the existing mandate to conduct waste characterization studies, specifically requiring one in 2028 and one in 2032. We appreciate the councilmember's forethought on this. Only by knowing what is in our waste can we hope to reduce and divert it, and we have certainly found past studies to be useful. Thank you, and we look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your testimony. I'll begin by asking, has the city ever analyzed the individual impact of the average New Yorker's divertible waste when it comes to landfill space required each year or annual carbon emissions produced?
So we collect substantial data about by the community board level, and I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Commissioner McDonald to talk a little bit about what we do at the per person level.
Okay.
The best source of information about the individual impact of waste generation can be found in the state solid waste management plan, which was recently released. They have, similar to our process, the state goes through a every 10-year solid waste management planning process, and they've published statistics statewide that compare individual planning units, and New York City is a planning unit in and of itself. And those numbers actually show that our per capita generation of waste is quite low compared to other areas in the state, particularly at the pounds per person per year basis.
And that's state information, right? The city doesn't perform that necessarily.
Correct. The state uses information that the city submits to perform those calculations.
Thank you. DSNY has been criticized for dropping its role in reaching the city's waste diversion goals, including through education to residents about the importance of waste reduction and recycling. Can you describe how the agency currently sees itself in the larger waste reduction movement?
Sure. I'm not familiar with the criticism you're referring to, and I would not accept the premise of it. I mean, just before I get to the answer, I'll just say that the Department of Sanitation is intimately involved in outreach and education around waste diversion, as evidenced by the fact that we're now in our third straight year of diversion rate increase, and that we've considered the 65% increase in compostable material kept out of landfill in 2 years. I don't see how that would be possible without a very aggressive outreach and education. So I wouldn't agree with that characterization. But that said, how do we see ourselves? The Department of Sanitation picks up 24 million pounds of trash today. We'll pick up 24 million pounds of trash tomorrow. We'll pick up 24 million pounds of trash the next day. It just keeps coming, and our role is to process it and make sure that as much of it as possible is put to beneficial use.
Organic waste makes up about a third of New York City's waste stream. As organic waste decomposes in landfills, it releases methane gas, which is 84 times more effective at absorbing the sun's heat than carbon dioxide over a 20-year time frame, which is pretty remarkable. Starting next month, every New Yorker will be required to separate their organic waste and set it out in a container for collection and recycling. This is already available in Queens and Brooklyn, but data that we've received and we're happy to share shows very low capture rates for organics collection, and I think that's where the criticisms are coming from, with 4.3% in Queens and 3.6% respectively in FY24. What do you attribute the low capture rates to in Queens and Brooklyn?
It's a new program. It took more than a decade to get to our current roughly 50% capture rates on metal, glass, plastic, and paper. Outreach and education has to be sustained over a long period of time, and that's what we're doing. I mean, I think that when you compare curbside capture rates and tonnage rates to what we're seeing in the schools, where it's handled by a staff, right, you really get at how much education is important in this. The numbers diverted from schools have just gone up because it's a smaller population where the department can conduct very direct education and outreach. Working with building managers and individual residents who manage their own waste is going to be a multi-year process, and we have no intention of backing off that process.
I'm excited about that a level of engagement that's going to be necessary. And that's also a big reason why the council restored community composting. We think it's going to make a big difference in terms of bringing that engagement, civic engagement, and education that we hope would increase participation and thereby improve capture rates and diversion rates. I'm also aware that I don't know if it's on about 2017. In Queens, the capture rate was twice the amount it is now. I think it was like 10%, whereas now it's 4.3%. Can you explain why we are trending downwards in that sense?
So there's a few pieces to this. The first thing that I think is worth mentioning, I don't want to be too critical of the prior administration, but the old legacy programs operated in cherry-picked districts, and that was true citywide. Okay, we think we're going to get a lot here, so that's where we're going to run the program to juice the numbers. The goal of this administration was to develop a universal program that works for everybody. Right? When it went online in all of Queens, the idea was every resident of the borough, and then later Brooklyn, and then in 2 weeks citywide, gets access to this same service. It's not a favor they're doing for us to give us juiced up numbers, right? It's a service we provide to all New Yorkers to keep this important material out of the waste or out of the landfill and waste to energy stream. So I do think it's going to be an ongoing process. I wouldn't describe us as trending down because I think the 2022.
I agree that under Eric Adams, it has been trending upward, but not to the levels that we want to see.
I understand.
And I understand. I think also to add to your answer, in 2020 when we removed curbside, and I understand this happened before your administration, we've built this muscle, right? Building the muscle of composting is something very serious. Like when you go to the gym, right? Over time, you're gonna build the stamina. You're gonna start looking better, start feeling better. But once you stop going to the gym, you're gonna lose those habits again. And I think that's why I think our city needs to continue to demonstrate a commitment to composting because we can't move that muscle again.
Yep.
Right? We can't remove those habits that people have been forming. If we were at 10% in 2017 in Queens, we could have been at 20 or 30% if we hadn't removed it.
I think that's why it's so important that in the new program, and I really do believe that in a fundamental way, the program that goes citywide in 2 weeks is different from it's a separate program from what existed pre-pandemic. It's not really, I wouldn't say it's unfair, but just on our side, we don't think of it as like, oh, the program was paused and then we restarted it. We think of the pre-pandemic composting program was eliminated and we developed a new program. So I think it is so fundamentally different that I wouldn't compare the pre-pandemic numbers with the current numbers, and we would just compare ourselves to ourselves. And I would say that to your point about that composting muscle, it was why it was so important to develop a plan where in the entire city, your composting day is your recycling day. It's not a third day. You have to remember it's the same. It's the metal, glass, plastic, and paper day and the composting day. It will really help people get into the groove as we move.
Yeah, look, and I understand that I understand why this administration will compare itself to what it's done, but New Yorkers are comparing what they've experienced before this administration came in and what's happening now, and so I think that's still very important information for the public because they're the ones who have felt the difference. The agency has previously stated that it will begin residential organics recycling enforcement next month, but that it will issue warnings instead of violations until spring 2025. DSNY previously reported it has sent mailers to our residents to warn them of the upcoming change. What other outreach and education has the DSNY done to help educate residents about new organic recycling requirements?
We're currently in the process of knocking the door of every building with 1 to 9 units, specifically to discuss curbside composting in the 3 boroughs that are about to come online.
Every door?
The door of every building with a 1 to 9 units. In the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island, we did the same thing in Brooklyn and Queens. I should have the number in front of me, and I'm sorry I don't. It's something like 275,000 buildings, but we can get you the exact number. And specifically, outreach staff going door to door to talk about curbside composting. We did do a mailer, significant social media, and there's a extensive amount of info sessions scheduled. There have been several over the last few months scheduled going forward at nyc.gov/curbside composting, as well as our work with community boards. And
Who's doing the door knocking, and what's the budget for that?
It's a contracted vendor funded by an EPA grant, actually. I believe the budget is about $500,000, but I can get you the exact number. But it's federal money.
So you believe you can knock on 275,000 doors with $500,000?
Yeah, absolutely. It's based on it's a per shift fee. That's what we paid to it's comparable program to what we did in Brooklyn and Queens. Although in Brooklyn and Queens, it was not an outside vendor. It was done by DSNY.
And do you have the name of the contracted?
Yeah, it's an MWBE firm called Lori Davis.
Glory?
LORI.
Lori Davis?
Yeah.
Do you know how big their team is?
It's 30 canvassers per day.
30 canvassers per day?
That's the field team. I don't know about the administrative staff offhand.
Okay. And do we know which doors are going to get knocked on first?
They've been working on this for several weeks, starting in the Bronx and working their way down. But they're also running teams in Manhattan and Staten Island.
Okay.
And the plan is to get everywhere.
And this is just with respect to the 1 to 9 unit requirement that's implemented in November, right?
No,
but
they're only talking about composting.
Organics? Okay.
They're doing 1 to 9 unit buildings because that was what we did in Brooklyn and Queens. It can be very difficult to get into a larger building. So the focus is just talk to, and particularly, larger buildings, as we know, have professional staff. They are more likely to know about the requirement because it's their job to manage the trash. So the focus of the canvassers is to reach residents in smaller buildings who manage their own trash and explain the process to them.
So in districts like mine where we have larger buildings,
Yes.
A lot of supers are not active, managed. A lot of landlords are absent. What do we do in that situation?
So that's where the mailing, social media, and work with community boards really become essential. The mailing was purposefully done to go to residents rather than property managers, to empower residents to go to their building management and their landlord, whatever the case may be, and say, I know that this program is coming. What is the plan for our building? The program has to be designed to work differently in every building, just like recycling. We don't mandate specifically where in the building the recycling bin needs to go, right? Buildings need that flexibility based on their different space needs and size, but we really wanted to empower residents to have the information they needed to say to their building management, I know that you must comply with this, it's the law.
What will be the exact process for DSNY's enforcement officers to conduct residential organics recycling enforcement?
It will be very similar to the enforcement that exists today around improper separation of metal, glass, and plastic. My understanding of the Zero Waste Act is that it's written to set it up as essentially the same type of violation. So what is illegal under the law is putting compostable material in the trash, not not having any. If someone doesn't have any compostable material, they don't have to participate in the program. But it is certainly our intention to conduct the same kind of enforcement that we do now.
Can you speak to what that looks like?
It can happen at the curb level. It can happen sometimes at the transfer station side. It can happen from supervisory staff who are observing collection. It takes a lot of forms, with picking up as much as we do in as many places as we do. But once this becomes illegal citywide, since of course the law rolls it out by borough, we will be developing a more thorough and detailed plan around enforcement.
How many enforcement agents does DSNY have dedicated to residential organics?
Enforcement staff are rarely dedicated to a specific item, only when mandated, for example, around commercial waste zones, where there were enforcement staff set up to do commercial waste zone enforcement. Enforcement staff enforce against a variety of violations.
So how do we have confidence that that violations on source separation for organics, that enforcement for that would succeed without a clear understanding of how many we're going to...
The department has a legacy of enforcing regulations around source separation of other materials, and that work is going to continue as this is added to the requirements for source separation.
Could a sanitation worker who is on a collection truck issue a violation related to residential organics, or would the issuance of the violations need to wait until an enforcement agent can be present?
Sanitation workers cannot issue violations for any
Cannot?
cannot, but there are multiple groups that can issue violations. One is our dedicated enforcement staff, and the other primary group is the sanitation supervisor, which is one level up from sanitation worker. Every sanitation worker on collection has a direct supervisor, and they are supposed to call observed violations in under many circumstances. So, for example, if a sanitation worker sees a mattress that's not properly wrapped as required by law, they are supposed to call it in to their supervisor, who then comes and writes the violation. So a sanitation worker has an existing process to report violations that they observe, even though it is not in their job duties to write the violation personally.
I would like to recognize Councilmember Carr. Join us. As we've discussed, brown bins will be used to containerize New York residents' organic waste. On approximately what date can New Yorkers expect to receive their brown bins?
Deliveries are underway now, and I believe upwards of 1,000 are being delivered each day. Kate, do you want to say a little more about that?
Sure. So anyone who ordered...
I got mine, by the way.
Oh, you did? Great. Awesome. Anyone who ordered a bin in the month of August will receive it prior to service on October 6th, and then the deliveries that were requested in September will be rolling after that.
What happens if a building resident who is not an owner orders a brown bin to be delivered to and used at a building with many other tenants? Will DSNY still deliver the bin?
Yes.
Yes.
What should a building tenant do if their landlord, in some way or form, refuses to allow the tenant to comply with organics recycling mandates?
They should continue to insist to them that it is the law, first of all. They are also always welcome to reach out to us, our customer service team, through 311, on social media, through the contact form on our website. If we did, in fact, in Brooklyn and Queens, receive social media complaints from people who said, I live in a 40-story high-rise and my building's not participating. A member of our staff went and said, gee, it sure seems like you could use an info session. How can we help? What can we do to help you comply with this law? So we would encourage people, when they feel frustrated and exhausted with working with their building management directly, to reach out to us, and we'll do what we can.
Is there, can they make a 301 complaint based off of this?
They can do it through a comment to the Department of Sanitation. There is not a dedicated SR for this topic at this time.
Okay. And will the agency consider maybe like doing a portal or something, or?
Certainly consider it, of course.
Okay. Because I'm going to expect widespread non-compliance. Especially when something new comes on, right? In the beginning, though, the warnings, I'm sure make a big difference. But at some point, I want to make sure that we're having strong compliance and that our tenants and residents who are subject to bad actors,
right,
that they can voice their concerns on, their bins were stolen or the landlords were refusing to comply with the mandate, and those type of things. For October 6th, is that for all bins or just the brown bins?
That's for the brown bins that were ordered prior to September 1st, will be delivered by October 6th. If you want the schedule on the wheelie bins, anybody who orders, actually are still within the window now, anybody who orders by October 1st is guaranteed to get them by the November 12th mandate date.
Thank you. After DSNY receives a complaint that a building owner is not allowing a resident to comply with organics recycling mandates, how does the agency respond?
Well, it depends on the exact nature of the complaint.
And do you reach out to the owner? My apologies.
It depends on the exact nature of the complaint, but we do have a few options. One would be to go and observe collection, or rather to observe set out prior to collection, and to issue a warning if we agree that the building is in non-compliance. If it's a larger managed building, we may proactively reach out to management and offer to assist them. We do conduct site visits. We have a team dedicated to helping buildings with their waste set out. We offer we call our Clean Buildings training, which is a regular training program for building management about how to comply with sanitation regulations that includes a substantial module about the source separation of compostable material. So we would, I guess I would say that it's a case by case, but that we would always try to begin with a positive direct contact and move into an enforcement mode if necessary.
According to the latest MMR, Mayor's Management Report, over 400 smart bins were deployed in fiscal year 2024. How did DSNY decide where to prioritize the sightings of these smart bins, and how will DSNY ensure that businesses which are required to sort their organic waste do not misuse the smart bins?
So I'll take the two questions separately. The smart bins have been an incredibly successful program. In FY23, they were opened 300,000 times. In FY24, they were opened more than 1.2 million times, which is amazing. I mean, it's just so gratifying to see this program used so widely. The placement follows a couple of different models because this rolled out in phases and because we're basically, examining best practices. In certain parts of the city, they are clustered. Okay, there's several in the neighborhood. The idea was to see, is it effective to use it as sort of a part of a neighborhood service. And in other areas, they are placed along commercial corridors. And the idea was, where people are commuting on foot. We've actually seen success with both of these models. The bins on the west side of Manhattan and on the Upper East Side follow sort of the commercial corridor model and are widely used. The bins in Prospect Heights and Astoria follow the cluster model, and they are also very widely used. So we're happy to see this is a program that people really enjoy using. And also, one thing that I don't want to speak for the department, I'll say that I was personally surprised that the tonnage didn't really go down after curbside service became available. People were still using the bins quite widely. Or I shouldn't say tonnage because we can't measure the separate tonnage from the smart bins, but the usage, the unlocks, did not substantially change. To your question about business waste, the opening is sized for household individual use. A business that produces sort of this much compostable material per day, it would be illegal for them to use them, and if we caught them, we would fine them for it. But it's a small amount that they can put in at one time, and so it's not a phenomenon I'm familiar with of a business trying to use one.
Is there a plan to order more smart bins?
There is no funding for additional smart bins at this time.
No. Local law requires that the city's next local solid waste management plan emphasize reduced landfilling and incineration of organic waste. How will the city maximize the beneficial reuse of organic waste from residential collections?
So I'll talk about beneficial use in general, and then Jenna, if you have anything to say about how it fits into this solid waste management plan. The goal of the program is always beneficial use, and you're, like I would imagine, going to ask later about our new composting processing contracts.
Yes.
But the goal of all of those contracts is beneficial use. The beneficial use on the end use side is already maximized. It's at well over 95%. And the point now is to increase the amount of total waste that's kept out of landfill and sent to that. Once it's given to us as part of the curbside composting program, we feel very positively about the beneficial use number broadly, and I'll talk a little bit more later about the breakdown between composting and anaerobic digestion.
Yes. Does the city plan to build more composting facilities?
We recently completed a major expansion of the Staten Island compost facility. It can now accept about 2,000% more food waste than it could prior to that expansion. There's no plan to build an additional composting site at this time, but let me share something really quickly before Councilmember Nurse leaves, because I know she's going to be interested in this. I'll just say it really fast. I know you were about to ask about it. Under the new paradigm we're putting into place for the processing of organic material collected as part of the curbside composting program, it drastically increases the number of districts where the material will be sent to be composted, while decreasing the number of districts where it will go to be anaerobically digested at Newtown Creek. Under the new contracts, material from approximately 1/3 of New York City community districts, 19 of the 59, will be sent to be composted. The number of districts sending material to Newtown Creek will decrease from 25 to 12. Of course, the tonnage numbers are dependent on how much people put out. We set up our system by community board, but as I know this council has asked several times, the share of community districts sending material to be composted is growing substantially, and the amount sending material to Newtown Creek is falling by more than half.
Does the city plan to build more anaerobic digesters?
No.
In 2023, DEP published a RFEI soliciting potential customers for biodigester methane. Can you provide any updates pertaining to that solicitation?
DEP should provide the official update, but I am aware of the RFEI process, and I believe that's just for the use of the gas that is produced at their digesters, which is produced regardless of whether or not food waste is added to the digesters. They produce it from wastewater.
That's fair. We'll ask DEP. How will the city ensure that the food waste, which New Yorkers will work hard to separate and recycle, doesn't end up in a landfill?
Well, it doesn't end up in landfill, which is great news, right? The material is either composted into soil, finished compost to be used in our gardens and parks. The city has produced an average of about 42 million pounds per year over the last decade, and we expect that number to climb substantially, or to heat and power homes, particularly in Brooklyn, through anaerobic digestion.
That's fine.
You want to add something, Jim?
I could add. I could add that the new contracts actually have a requirement that 90% of the material is beneficially reused after accounting for contamination.
This July, we asked the mayor's office to help us learn how much it costs to run the city's anaerobic digesters. We are still waiting for that information. Does the agency have any pertinent information to provide now?
DEP runs the anaerobic digestion at Newtown Creek, so they would be best to answer that.
All right, we'll ask them. According to City Harvest, a New York City food rescue organization, average monthly visits to local food pantries and soup kitchens are up to 80% this year compared to 2019. There are laws in place to require certain establishments to donate their leftovers, but many restaurants routinely throw away perfectly edible food. To what extent do food donors use the city's food donation portal? And are there improvements that can be made to the portal to increase its use or alternative ways to facilitate food donation?
So the city has operated the Donate NYC donation portal, which includes a food section as well as textiles and durable goods, for many years now. And in FY24, that portal processed over 43,000 tons, so 86 million pounds of food for donation. Always happy to work with council members on outreach around that to businesses, organizations that may have additional material to donate, or organizations that may be looking for donation. Kate, do you have anything to add? I would say that's it.
Are there ways improvements can be made to the portal to increase its use? And do you think that the portal is used sufficiently, or would you like it to be used more?
You know, look, I'll put it this way. The portal was The number of the amount of material coming through the portal now is historically high. It's higher than it's ever been, with one exception, which is FY21, when it was a major component of the city's emergency food program. Barring a citywide response to a global emergency, it is currently used more than it's ever been used before. Would love to work with the council on ways to expand it, but as from sort of a user friendliness side, from an operations side, we believe that it's functioning as it should.
DSNY has been involved in the enforcement of street vendor regulations. Local law requires that when an agency seizes food, when a Department of Health employee or an agent of the OHMH is present, and certifies that the food meets local sanitary requirements, the agency shall, prior to disposing of the food, notify a food organization about its availability. Has that been happening?
It has been. I have outdated numbers about it. We could get you a better number. It would probably take me a few minutes to pull it up either. I had seen a report about it some weeks ago, so I don't want to give you all data, but I can say for certain that it is happening. Both donation if the food is safe and composting if the food is unsafe.
Do you know how often it happens, the notification to food rescue organizations?
Anytime food is confiscated and a Department of Health certification person is available, it happens enough that I've seen data on it before. We can get you more reliable.
I would like to see examples of...
Yeah, I mean, on street vending enforcement, I think it's important to remember that seizure of material is sort of, that means we've already gone through a few steps anyway, right? We try to take a warnings first approach to our vendor enforcement. There's a lot of sort of discretion involved. If a seizure is necessary, then we try to get a inspector there to guarantee food safety. So we're already a little ways down the process. It's not a extremely common use case, but it does happen, and we are complying with the law.
What percent of street vendor enforcement interactions involve at least one DOHMH employee?
I don't know whether they are present for the actions or called after the fact as needed, but we can get back to you with that.
And I would also like to know the percent of food seized during street vendor enforcement operations is donated to food rescue organizations. You said you would send that?
Yes, we can get that and the amount that's composted.
All right, I don't want to I have more questions on organics, but if my colleagues have questions, I think now would be a good opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the Sanitation Department and to the Deputy Commissioner, thank you. My questions pointed towards, I want to go back to the bins. Is there a limit on the amount of bins that a person can order?
On that, thank you very much, Councilmember. On the brown bins for composting, any address can get
the board.
one free one.
Okay.
And then they can purchase as many as they need at bins.nyc. And on the other bins, the wheelie bins for trash containerization and recycling, there's no limit. They can purchase as many as they need.
So since it's the law that they have to have them, when it comes to vandalism or it being stolen, how is that dealt with? Would they have to get a police report? Because I know there's a certain amount of time it takes for the garbage men to get back to them if they have to reorder one.
So there's a few things on this. First thing I'll say about it is the rules around residential waste containerization don't mandate the use of our bin until June of 2026.
Okay.
You must use a bin starting November 12th of this year. If you already have one, as people in many parts of the city have been using bins for years, you're certainly welcome to continue to use yours. We're not saying you have to get rid of it the first day and replace it with ours, as long as it meets the current rules, which are 55 gallons or less and with a secure lid. But if they've been using it all along, I'm sure they can keep using it. The NYC bin will be required in June of 2026 and is available now for anyone in a 1 to 9 unit building who is containerizing for the first time. We always like to point out that it is by far the cheapest bin of its quality available. It's about a third the price of the similar bins you would see in stores. So on the points about theft and vandalism, there are sort of a few points I want to make around that, which are New York City is not the first place to require the use of bins for trash. In fact, we're just about the last among developed cities. When you think about other places that use bins, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Skokie, I mean, everywhere, right? There is not some sort of like perpetual bin theft epidemic. It's not as if every week in Chicago you go to put your trash out and your bin has been stolen. We certainly, and when also related to that, businesses in New York City have been required to put their trash in bins since March of this year. And while there have been some anecdotal reports of bin theft, you also see a tremendous amount of commercial bins in use. You know, they stay on the street and they get used properly, but obviously, we know it is the sort of thing that can happen. I just always like to talk about, we're talking about a hypothetical here.
Right, in those situations.
So in those situations, we've done a few things to try to minimize it. There's a big white space on the side of the bin to write your address. They all have a serial number, and they have an RFID. Now, that's not a tracker, but it does mean that if we find one that's been misplaced or moved, it is likely going to be easy to replace, to get it back to where it's supposed to go. So, if your bin is stolen or vandalized, we would recommend getting a police report and if you receive a summons, which of course, look, if the supervisor, we talked about the supervisors who do the enforcement, if they know that a building uses a bin every day and then one day the bin is gone, they obviously they have the ability to use their discretion about it. Oh, gee, I wonder what happened. They always use their bins. They don't have it. They can use discretion. But if someone receives a summons for uncontainerized trash because their bin has been stolen, there's an existing process to contest that. They can go down to oath, and they can bring the police report, and they can say to the oath judge.
Material. Okay. Moving on to another topic, the electronic disposal program.
Yes.
Particularly, I know there's some items that still have to go through 311. You have to call and get it, I guess, marked. But those items that are not eligible for that, what reasonable accommodations are being done for elderly or people with disabilities who can't make it to those sites?
Right. So you're correct that there is no curbside program today for those items. There have been small-scale curbside programs in the past. The options are to drop it off at one of our pop-up events, to take it to a special waste site, which we have one in every borough. Certain items can be brought back to the retailer from which they were purchased. And then also, we have, starting this year, I believe is the first time, one community recycling event per community board. So there should be, and I understand some people can't go anywhere.
The reality is that there are some seniors and
Yes.
people with disabilities who never leave their home.
Right.
But obviously have items that they want to get rid of.
Of course.
What reasonable accommodations are made for them to assist them so they're not left in the dark?
Kate, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that any building in the city that's over 10 units can sign up for a free electronics recycling program, and
Okay.
that it'll be in your building, so you just have to bring it downstairs, and it's free pickup, it's free for the city, and it's free for the building.
So that information is being
Yes.
distributed. So, okay. Thank you. Thank
Do you have
Mr.
any
Chair.
more questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Since e-cycle got mentioned, I have to mention the lack of the curbside e-waste pickup program in Staten Island. And I just want to reemphasize, e-cycle is great, and it's applies to so many parts of the city that have that kind of building stock. And it was not restored in this year's budget, and I'd really like it to be restored in the November plan. Do you think there's a willingness on the part of the agency and the commissioner to bring back this program? Because landfilling of e-waste was banned by state law, as it probably should have been, although I think the timing was a little difficult for the city. But these things are sitting in people's homes, or they're ending up dumped where they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you, Councilmember. I think we have to leave budgetary discussions for a budget hearing, but certainly strongly share your goal of keeping this material out of landfill. And I'm glad I figured we would get the chance to talk about this, but did just want to mention there is one of those community recycling events that takes e-waste in Princess Park this weekend. So if you have constituents who would like to come down on Saturday, we would be happy to take their material there.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and I'm always happy to promote those events, but it's not a curbside program.
Understood.
Right? I mean, how much cooperation you think you get from New Yorkers if composting was only a delivery drop-off program? Virtually none. So I think that these models are fine to have as a bridge to something, but we have to get somewhere, and restoring curbside e-waste has to be a priority.
Understood. I look forward to discussing it at a budget hearing.
Thank you.
All right, I'm turning back to organics. I had a question I wanted to ask you earlier, but didn't get the opportunity to. Kind of just forgot to ask the question. How will DSNY observe compliance with organic separation mandates? Trash bags are not clear to observe if it has organic waste in it.
It's true that they're not clear. However, there are certain telltale signs of compostable material in a trash bag, particularly the world-famous garbage juice. And certainly I don't want to get ahead of a fully developed plan, but the sanitation department has been known to open bags in pursuit of source-separated material.
I would like to have some guidance on this. I don't know if it's like a feel or if it's a hunch. It's a spot check. I would like to see what a plan.
Yes, I understand.
In your testimony, Commissioner, you spoke about commercial source separation for organics. Certain commercial entities in New York City are required to separate and recycle their organic waste, but many businesses do not comply, throwing out pounds and pounds of perfectly good food on a consistent basis. Can you describe current DSNY enforcement operations on commercial organics recycling?
They're limited because the law has so many loopholes and carve-outs. Local Law 146 of 2013 makes it so difficult to know whether a business is legally required to comply. There are some places that very clearly fall into the covered bucket.
What's the covered? Who covers that bucket?
It's square footage, it's number of seats, it's type of material sold. Is it a restaurant? Is it not a restaurant? All the details are at nyc.gov/commercial organics. But it is so, when you look at this and you go, wow, this was the product of extremely complex negotiations between the Bloomberg administration and a council 11 years ago. Like, you can look at it and just tell that it was written in a different time by a big group of people. Whereas today, we all work together on universal programs. We just want to say, if you have food waste, you got to separate it, just like we do for residents. And then I will say, this is a little bit different than enforcement, but it's a very important point about commercial organic separation. We're not afraid of enforcement. We'll do as much as we have to do to get compliance. But whenever we can offer a positive encouragement to do something, it's great, right? Under the commercial waste zone law, a business source separating its organics will actually save money. Every pound of material that they put in their organics bin instead of their trash bin, that is less money they are paying to their carter. So that's huge, and it will really help mitigate the need for enforcement, although we are certainly willing to do enforcement as needed.
How many businesses are currently subject to the requirement for organic waste separation?
Happen to know, do you? No, we'll have to get back to you on that.
And of those businesses, how many of them have been issued violations?
We do have that number.
Can you tell us the number?
I don't have it today, but we can get it.
I mean, it's important for us to know
Absolutely.
that information because as the agency seeks to expand its enforcement authorities on all commercial businesses, what good would it be without us having that information of what your current inspection is like? Are you dedicating resources to enforcement? How many staffers? This is something that I know that in every hearing so far, the last 3 or 4 maybe, I don't want to be exact, the commissioner has spoken about wanting to expand this power, but I'm not getting information on what that enforcement currently looks like.
We can get that to you. I do want to emphasize that one of the reasons that we want the law expanded is because it will make enforcement simpler. I mean, you think about, for example, if I can just give an example from another one of our programs. Before the set-out time change, businesses could put out their trash an hour before close. And it let them completely escape enforcement by going, oh, yeah, we're closing early today. Like, whatever. It meant there was, no way to know. And so right now, the commercial organics law is so full of holes that there are some that we know, have to comply, and we do enforcement. And there are some where it's so easy for them to go, oh, no, I don't have 7 chairs. I only have 6, and the other chair's, in the back, leaned over, So really eliminating those loopholes will drastically improve our enforcement ability. And we can get you the existing number, but I do just want to emphasize that a change in the law will fundamentally change the nature of the enforcement.
All right, I'm going to still ask these remaining questions on this issue, just so that it's on the record and so that we can get those documents. What is the process by which DSNY detects a potential violation for these commercial businesses that are subject to the source separation requirement?
Right. We have enforcement staff who focus on commercial violations.
When does commercial organics enforcement take place?
It can take place at any hour of the day. We have enforcement. I don't believe it is one of the requirements that's only limited to the 2 routing times per day, because if the waste is set out, it can be observed.
Which areas of the city are most often covered by organics enforcement officers?
Well, yeah, it would primarily be commercial corridors, but we can see if there's any specific trends.
How many violations related to commercial organics recycling did the DSNY issue in fiscal year 24? You say you would get that for us?
Get that for you.
What % of the violations related to commercial organics recycling issued have been given to repeat offenders?
It's a good question. We can look into that.
Yeah. When DSNY notices that a business is a repeat offender, does DSNY do any additional work to speak with the business to provide education?
Right. We do often encourage repeat offenders on all violations to attend info sessions, but I'll see if we have anything specific to add.
Okay. All right. So those are. I personally share the goal of increasing compost, or rather, source separation of organic materials at businesses, but I need to know to what extent has, under the law that passed many years ago, how enforcement has looked like for those businesses subject to that before we decide, you know what, everybody should be subject to this, right? That's an important piece that we're going to need as a committee. All right, I'm going to turn over to talk about plastics really quickly. Actually, before I do that, let me just dive into the mayor's management report. The mayor's management report was recently released, and we have some additional questions on what we read. 56.8% of refuse trucks and 26.2% of recycling trucks were dumped on shift in fiscal 2024, resulting in a need for staff overtime for dumping of over 40% of DSNY collection trucks. DSNY paid $158.3 million in overtime pay during FY24 and $176.2 million in FY23. Acknowledging that the agency has made a significant improvement in this area over the last year, 15% or so, how will DSNY continue to improve this number to reduce staff overtime cost?
So dump on shift, just to provide some definitions for everybody in the room, is an efficiency metric. In sort of an ideal world, when you're not dealing with the actual reality of life on the streets of New York City, a sanitation worker would go out on a route, fill up their truck with material, and take it to the dump and empty it on the same 8-hour shift, bringing the truck back to their garage empty so that it's ready to be used. However, in many parts of the city, that is not possible. Filling up the truck alone takes a full 8-hour shift, and because of the geography of the city. So dump on shift has seen a substantial increase, particularly on the refuse side, thanks to creative planning by Commissioner Tisch and our collections office around the destinations of some of the districts. Okay, instead of going to this dump, you'll go to this dump because it's, the people from here will go there. Moving things around has seen a big increase. It remains one of our most important efficiency metrics, and we're continuing to analyze options and discretion that we may have within our contracts. Because, of course, one of the things that sort of protects the city's waste stream broadly is our contracts for waste transport. And so those contracts protect us, and they protect the city from having trash piling up everywhere. But they also come with some sort of, okay, this much material has to go here, this much has to go there. So we're looking for ways within those contracts to continue to increase that efficiency metric, and we're happy to say that we've made a lot of progress.
So you would say that dumped on shift has increased because of the reduction in time travel or distance travel?
Yes, that's a major piece of it. There is some change to the collection routes themselves, although the biggest change is creative thinking about where within the city the truck is taken to be dumped.
And have you identified other opportunities in the upcoming year or so to continue dump?
I don't want to
on shift
say anything that could potentially conflict with current or future procurements. I'll just say that this is a goal that's important to us.
All right. Well, we would like to see that improvement continue. I appreciate your answer on that. The average proportion of collection trucks that were out of service in fiscal 24 increased from 26% in FY23 to 28% in FY24, a 5-year high. As DSNY refreshes its fleet, to what extent is it looking to electrifying its fleet?
So electrification is first, let me say that you are absolutely right that the amount of trucks out of service increased. As the MMR points out, this was due to budget reduction for the amount of mechanics that we have. Just is what it is. The electrification, we are making substantial progress on electrifying everything except the collection trucks. We are planning to electrify and are actually making a lot of progress. The bike lane sweepers, the full-size street sweepers. We have the first, that truck is called a Class 7 street sweeper. That's what the full size is called. We have the first fully electric Class 7 street sweeper in the world. And we are continuing to electrify that fleet. All of our passenger cars, our pickup trucks, all of that stuff. We are making a lot of progress, and we are on track to meet the city's aggressive goals around fleet electrification. On the collection truck, our heavy-duty fleet, there is currently no viable electrification option. We piloted an electric collection truck, and it worked great for picking up the trash. It was really good at that. But it was not able to handle the work of plowing the snow. Obviously, we've gotten less snow than most of our lives over the last couple of years. There is no way to know whether that will continue or not. But the electric technology for heavy-duty vehicles that exists today is not sufficient for the dual use of our fleet, trash collection and snow clearing. So we're electrifying everything else.
So we're not transitioning to electrification right now because of the limitations.
That's correct. However, in the meantime, we did complete a transition to 100% renewable diesel, using diesel which is not produced in the traditional way, but is made from renewable sources. And we are the Department of Sanitation is the largest user of renewable diesel of all city agencies. It's better for the environment. It's actually also substantially better for the sanitation workers. It doesn't smell nearly as bad in the garages.
Why do you think that there's no market for these electrifying fleets? I mean, that just surprises me.
It's a niche use case. There are very few places that need a fully electric 65,000 pound collection truck that can also plow snow, because New York is sort of, it's unique in so many ways, but one of them is the combination of geography and density, right? We're in a place that gets snow, and we have a finite amount of storage space for our fleet. In Toronto, for example, they can have a separate snowplow fleet that just kind of sits there 6 months out of the year, because space is not as expensive as it is here. There's places to put it. We don't have a space for another 2,500 trucks in New York City, right? So it has to be a truck we already have.
Unless it was replaced in real time with the existing truck.
But where would it physically be? That's what I mean. Like when it's not in use. If we had a fleet of 2,500 heavy-duty trucks that were only used for the 4 to 5 months that it might snow, where would we physically keep them? The collection truck is already here, and it's already in every neighborhood, right? Even if we had like a big depot somewhere in New Jersey, and then all of a sudden there's a freak snowstorm and they can't get over through the tunnel, right? This is a model that's worked for us for the quick reopening after a snowstorm, but it means that it has to be a specific kind of heavy-duty truck. And I know, like in Miami, their collection trucks are also used for storm debris removal when they get hurricanes, but it's still a different thing than the dual use that we have around snow removal, where these trucks always carry a lot of weight. They pick up 10, 12 tons of trash. But pushing that snow for miles and miles and miles, that's a whole different drain on the battery. We hope the technology gets there. It would be great.
If a market existed, this is a hypothetical, if the market existed, would storage be a limitation?
Storage would be a limitation in some of our facilities, and we've looked at this before. You're talking about not just a fleet upgrade, but a substantial upgrade to many of our facilities. There are some sanitation garages that are coming up on 100 years old, and they were not built to process that kind of electrical load. Obviously, any kind of problem like that is theoretically solvable, but that pushes it the process of fully electrifying the heavy-duty DSNY fleet, that pushes it from a multi-million-dollar fleet upgrade to a multi-billion-dollar facilities upgrade.
So storage is a limitation then?
I would say so.
Okay. How many auto truck mechanics does DSNY have on staff?
We have that. I'm sorry, I didn't know that would be on the agenda for today. We can get that back to you.
All right.
But it is that is a number that was impacted by the vacancy reduction and the November plan.
How many DSNY mechanics are uniquely assigned to each sanitation district?
The mechanics, and we can include that breakdown, but just so you know, the mechanics can be assigned to a borough repair shop or to our central repair shop. And then depending on the size of a repair need, it either goes to the local place in the borough or it goes to the big shop, which is in Woodside, Maspeth, depending on who you ask.
Are there any DSNY mechanics required to staff multiple sanitation districts?
Yes, because the repair shops serve a borough.
How many DSNY mechanics have resigned or otherwise left DSNY employment during the last 12 months?
We should be able to show change over time in our mechanics.
Is DSNY actively engaged in hiring additional mechanics?
Yes, we are engaged in hiring a number that I don't have in front of me, but I know it was still lower than recent historical numbers.
How soon can you get us this data?
When we receive the formal request from committee
Okay.
council, we should be able to turn it around relatively quickly.
Within?
A week?
Okay. What is the overall overtime cost attributable to wages paid to DSNY mechanics during the last 12 months? Same thing?
Yeah, I would suggest including that, and that would be only the cost of the mechanics and not the cost in sanitation worker overtime that may be due to equipment outage, right? When a truck is not functioning and then so they have to use a different truck instead, and that can lead to overtime as well.
Okay. Commissioner, this one is interesting to me. DSNY reports that it missed 0.0% of collections in FY23 and 24, yet council members and 301 regularly receive complaints about missed collections. How can the agency reconcile this?
The miscollection number is one of the great accomplishments of the last few years. Can I just be really honest about the miscollection thing for a second? I hate to admit that I was once cynical about this and believed that the 1 point, because I think of myself as a very I believe that government can solve all of our problems, kind of person. But I thought the 1.4% miscollection rate was amazing. And then it turned out we could go so much lower. And I was shocked by this. And we are at the point now where missed collections round down in the MMR to 0.0. Of course, there are some. Although the absolute number is actually still, it was a 0.0 last year, and it's a lower 0.0 this year. And we did that through a few things. Let me first talk about a big operational change we made at the agency, which you are familiar with, which is Trash Dash. Trash Dash is the Department of Sanitation's version of CompStat. It is a weekly data report that goes to everyone in the department on the uniform side with the rank of supervisor or above, so a substantial number of people, and it drills down on a tremendous amount of metrics, many of which are customer-facing, in particular miscollections. It shows miscollections by number, and then you can look at it online and look at more, on our intranet and look at it in more detail. Where they are in your district, where they were on which route, how many are repeats, have reported before, what sanitation worker was working the truck that day, exactly what, you can see them mapped out, all this stuff. And so the supervisors and then the superintendents who run a district have really put a tremendous focus on stopping this at the commissioner's direction. It is astounding, the change we've been able to make on it. And then I'll just say one other thing about it that we've done is we did a lot of public education to clarify certain things that would previously or likely would previously have produced a miscollection complaint. So, for example, many people didn't realize that bulk items like a couch go out on the night that you're just putting out trash, not the night you're putting out your recycling. And so we did a citywide mailing about that to just let people know, we will get it if you just put it on the right night. The reason for that is because on the recycling night, we might be running a dual bin truck and there's no space for a bulk item. Mm-hmm. It's not just we're being difficult.
It needs to be carried by two individuals. That's the policy, right?
Yeah, yes. but it needs to go in the rear loader that's one chamber in order to fit. So letting people know about that. We also empowered the supervisors with a sticky pad. They have a new sticky pad, new in the last year, that lets them explain to the resident with checkboxes why their item might not have been picked up. Hey, you put out a mattress, but we couldn't take it because it wasn't wrapped in plastic. It's not safe, Or you put out a bulk item and it's not your bulk day, or there's 5 or 6 reasons listed on there, and that's helped that two-way communication, letting residents know. So then, to the last part of your question, you hear about miscollections. I have kind of two opinions on this, because I hear them too. I monitor the department social, I'm out at community events, or people say, one of the things that I often hear is that old, cynical, they never pick it up anyway. And I think that some of what council members hear sometimes is not actually a specific missed collection complaint. It's someone who lived in the city at a time, has lived in the city since a time when the department was not as focused on customer service as it is today, and they have that old mindset. And people say to me, well, they don't pick up my trash anyway. And I go, really? On what day was your trash not picked up? And all of a sudden it's like, well, I guess recently it's been pretty good. Yeah. So I always ask people for specifics. And then if they do have specifics, please, 311. As I said at the beginning of this answer, it goes right into a report that the commissioner on down looks at every week. So if you report it to 311, believe me, you're going to get special attention.
Let me ask you a question. So if an individual says they didn't get a miscollection and that becomes a 311 complaint, they can't file the miscollection on the same day, right? It needs to be within 24 hours or something?
That's right, because they don't know which shift of the day their trash will be collected on. There's general consistency.
So within 24 hours, or can they file the complaint at a minimum of 24 hours? Is that the policy? Or
that's correct.
And so if then sanitation has the opportunity to correct for a miscollection, and let's say someone calls you, there's no miscollection, they do it after the 24-hour period, DSNY then comes to cure what the complaint was.
Right.
The way that's calculated, that's not a miscollection because you guys were able to cure it?
There's been no change on that side of it as far as
So that
I
probably
know.
explains the 0%.
Well, except that it was always like that, even when it was 2%.
I just want to make
5%.
clear that that the public knows that. So that's probably the reconciliation here, is that there are miscollections, but whenever someone submits a complaint after the 24-hour period and DSNY cures it, they're not adding that cure as part of a miscollection.
Oh,
right?
no, I don't believe that's, I don't believe that's correct. I think that if it was reported as a miscollection, it still goes into that number. That what the MMR is reporting is reported miscollections. That said, it's a good sort of reminder that this is not necessarily the right group to discuss that issue. Then this was the waste diversion hearing. Happy to talk about it when we can make sure we have the right folks here, because I do want to make sure I'm giving.
I would like to know if the miscollection is calculated up when someone makes the call, or this is also taking into account the opportunity to cure.
I believe it's a report of what was reported, but we will confirm for you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to plastics. And these are, I believe, will be my last set of questions. DSNY puts recycling revenue at only $15 per ton and recycling cost at $779 per ton. What are some things DSNY would like to see to make recycling more profitable? And how can the city support increased profitability?
Diversion of paper is by far the best way to increase our revenue. We actually have thresholds in some of our contracts. The more tons of paper we divert per month, the higher payment we get from our vendors. So focusing on really capturing as much paper as possible. And then on the metal, glass, and plastic side, it's based on market commodity indices that fluctuate. So the department has no control over those market prices, but continuing to divert material can help by having more tonnage run through that system. And every ton has a credit based on that market value.
What does the city support look like for that increased profitability?
Yeah, I think it comes back to outreach and education always, right? I mean, for what it's worth, when you're talking about the market forces involved in diversion, it's good to remember that those of us who are sort of really interested in this issue probably read a lot of the national press coverage about like, oh, there's markets collapse, whatever. I always think it's important to remind people that New York City is protected by long-term contracts. So we were not hit by the same sort of huge market changes in 2017 and 18 that happened nationally. That said, we would love to see the costs come down and the revenue go up. So that's one of many reasons why we push people to follow the law.
Recently, governments have been involved in litigation against private companies over claims that the companies falsely promoted their plastic packaging as recyclable, when in reality much of the material could not be repurposed. What percentage of plastic materials that make it into the residential and institutional recycling streams are landfilled?
I just read about this litigation, this California case. I wouldn't have comment on that specifically because I know it's sort of breaking news. But on your question about how much is ultimately put to beneficial use, that's something we have to check on. Yeah, right. I mean, we know it's it's about a 50% capture rate out of the waste stream. If your question is about ultimate.
Yeah, my question is, what percentage of plastic materials that make it into residential and institutional recycling streams are landfilled?
Right. Okay. That's not something that's currently reported to us by our vendors.
Okay. What percentage of plastic materials that make it into residential and institutional recycling streams are sent for incineration at waste to energy plants?
Same, right? Yeah. Also not reported to us by our vendors.
And what are the percentages for metals and glass? Same?
Yeah, I would say, remember that they have a financial incentive. Their goal is to sell the material. So they try to keep those numbers as low as possible. They don't report it to us, but their whole business model is dependent on getting that number as low as they possibly can.
Does DSNY have any plans to reduce its use of waste to energy as a form of recycling?
We use waste to energy as an alternative to landfilling. It's not something we currently use as an alternative to recycling.
I want to turn briefly our attention to dining sheds. This summer, many restaurants had to deconstruct the outdoor dining sheds. Was DSNY involved in the collection of waste produced as a result?
We were in some cases. Some of it was collected by DOT and possibly other agencies, but we were occasionally called in to work.
Why the distinction?
I think it was just about crews
availability. Did DSNY consult with DOT about the massive number of deconstructed dining sheds?
I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in those conversations. I don't believe so.
I'm starting to, at least my offices, I'm imagining some offices are starting to field complaints that there's going to be a lot of deconstructed dining sheds. One is removing it and also how we are disposing of it as well. So is there a plan there? With respect to this is going to be happening.
It gets at well, first of all, I mean, it's commercial waste, right? The ones where DSNY is involved are mostly, not always, but mostly ones where the shed is abandoned, where it belonged to a business that no longer exists. The ones that may be coming down as a result of where the business is active and they've chosen to get rid of it, they would need to be working with their private carter.
All right, my last question is a question from Councilmember Nurse. She would like to know if the administration would be supportive or is open to including commercial waste as part of the waste containerization study.
As part of the waste characterization study?
Sorry, characterization study.
The first thing I'll say about that is that we are going to be getting so much more data than we ever have before about commercial waste through the commercial waste zone program. For example, I'll tell you, we've never actually had a way to calculate a commercial diversion rate. There's estimates that come out of the commercial transfer stations, but under the commercial waste zone program, we get so much data as that program comes online by zone about tonnage per stream and all. It's going to be great to have that material. So I think that after we look at full citywide rollout of that program, which of course does not have a specific timeline at this point, we're just doing the first zone now, and we see what sort of data we're already getting, then it would be appropriate to discuss whether that's a separate report, whether that comes into the waste characterization study, what it might look like. And let me just turn it over to Assistant Commissioner McDonald to add one point.
There is a requirement for the vendors to provide waste audits to all of their customers in the new contracts that, although not on a global level, can provide very detailed information about the waste at each commercial entity and what's in it. So that is a new provision that's included in these contracts that I agree with Deputy Commissioner Goodman will provide really excellent data about the commercial waste stream in New York City.
So if commercial waste was added as part of a characterization study, would that possibly be in violation of contract?
I don't know if that's the case. I just think that we already have a mechanism to get that information through the commercial waste zone contracts.
All right. My colleague Crystal Hudson couldn't join me today, but I do want to ask some questions on textiles. Textile waste can take hundreds of years to break down in a landfill, creating harmful emissions in the process. In 2023, textile waste comprised about 5% of residential curbside waste, down from 6.3% in 2017 and 6.2% in 2013, but up from 4.8% in 2005. What does the department see as its greatest challenges with creating and potentially even expanding local textile waste recycling resources?
So, Kate is the expert here. I'll turn it over in a second, but a few things. Textile waste is a challenging stream on the operations side because curbside collection of textiles for recycling is extremely limited by the fact that if the material gets wet, it's basically not recyclable. So we've looked at options around curbside, and we ran a pilot of curbside textile collection on Staten Island that was based on you had to schedule the pickup, and we would reschedule them if there was rain in the forecast. It's the only stream like that where the weather that day can ruin its ability to be recycled. And so that's why we've focused so far on things like the Refashion NYC program, where it's a bin in your building. It's inside the building, and when it's full, a vendor comes and picks it up and either recycles.
I have one in mind.
It's a great program.
Where does it go after a resident deposits it into that Refashion bin?
Yeah, so the city has a contract with the local nonprofit called Housing Works. You might have seen them. And so, as much as they can, they resell the clothing in their stores, and then some of it goes for recycling or other uses.
Would DSNY consider facilitating a clothing reuse platform to allow for the free exchange of products such as shoes that are clearly reusable?
So there is a textile option on the Donate NYC platform now. In FY24, it collected almost 4,500 tons of textiles for donation. So we do that and would be happy to work with you and continue to outreach around it.
Where's my opening? Do you know?
And that 4,500 tons through Donate NYC is in addition to donations through Refashions, completely separate, which were even more.
Thank you. I have no further questions. This panel is hereby excused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
If you have not already filled out a white slip with the sergeant, please do so if you wish to testify.
I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic: waste diversion or any of the legislation on our agenda. I'd like to repeat: waste diversion or any of the legislation on our agenda. That is the topic for today's hearing. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant at Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. I'm now going to call the first panel. We have Jessica Schreiber, Madeline Maglieri Wallace, and Christopher Leon Johnson. And thank you for joining us today. Jessica, you can start.
Think on? Okay. Hello, Sanitation and Solid Waste Management Committee. My name is Jessica Schreiber. I'm the founder and CEO of FabScrap, a nonprofit that provides textile reuse and recycling service to over 800 fashion companies in New York City. Prior to starting FabScrap, I worked at DSNY in the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability. I oversaw the Refashion NYC program for 5 years after its launch in 2012, and as part of my role, I organized and conducted a pilot of curbside collection of textiles in 2015. I'm here in support of Councilmember Hudson's bill to require DSNY to complete a household textile recycling mandate feasibility study. Textiles make up 5% of the city's total waste stream, the largest segment after traditional recyclables and organics. The current DSNY textile programs are only voluntary. I'm wondering if the department knows how much of the city's 200,000 tons of annual textile waste is actually captured and diverted by the voluntary programs. There are potentially significant challenges in mandating collection, sorting, and responsible end-of-life options for textiles, and I think these challenges should receive appropriate attention and be explored, and this study is a first step. And since DSNY already mentioned that commercial textile waste is a problem, I'd like to note, in working with 800 fashion and interior design companies, none of them were aware of the 10% textile waste recycling law. There is no enforcement of this law. I believe it would currently fall under BIC. And besides FabScrap, there is no infrastructure in place for businesses to actually comply with that law. And I would suggest that that be included in the study as well. Some additional context and insights just to make the study as effective as possible, that textile recycling is really downcycling. There are no fiber-to-fiber technologies ready to take real volume. Most material that is recycled is shredded into insulation, carpet padding, furniture lining, etc. The study should consider the practical and available end-of-life options. And I'll submit the rest in writing, I guess.
I'm going to give you all another minute. I'll give you guys 3 minutes each. You can.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll finish in that time. At this time, shredding of leathers and furs is not possible. Buttons and zippers must be removed, and so this study should consider how common household textiles can or cannot be shredded and sorted. The nearest facility available to shred large volumes is in South Carolina, so the study should consider the cost and environmental impact of moving collected materials or developing similar infrastructure within the city. The DSNY mentioned seasonal challenges, but this is also in the production of textile waste. People don't throw out textile waste the way they do other trash and recyclables. It's much more seasonal, and so an ongoing program may not be cost effective. Finally, thrift organizations are already overburdened by the amount of unusable clothing they receive. If textiles are banned, the study should include how nonprofits will be supported to build capacity to sort and redistribute usable items. And DSNY should be asked how they can ensure that our clothing waste is not simply relocated to become pollution or fill landfill in other parts of the world. I'm very hopeful that a thorough and focused study will provide steps forward to address our city's pre- and post-consumer textile waste problem, and thank you for taking action on this issue.
Of course.
Hello. Hi, City Council members, and in memory of Richard, I'm Madeline McGillivray. I'm here to testify in support of Intro 256. I'm going to echo a lot of what Jessica just mentioned. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I'm a climate professional with a microplastics and microfibers research background, and I direct the climate justice program of a multi-lens EJ and social justice nonprofit called Seeding Sovereignty. I was also part of the team at a startup called Retriever, which was an on-demand doorstep collection household textile and recycling service where I learned the challenges, nuances, technical needs, and education needs of recycling textiles. So as Chair Abreu, you've mentioned, we've come a long way with organics. We've talked a lot about that today, and we should be really proud. But there's another huge material stream at play. I recognize the progress already made with textiles diversion outlined by the Commissioner and Jessica, and I echo his comparison to magicians. I truly view anyone working in solid waste as real-life superheroes. But we're dealing with a system where we're throwing 200,000 tons per year of a material that is not waste into landfill, really questioning what the word waste means. And so we have to deal with that at some point. And until then, we'll be unnecessarily allocating tax dollars and city funds. Because New York's existing textiles recycling program is opt-in only, this material stream is vastly undertapped. There are people who can benefit, and the City of New York financially can benefit. Our circularity goals really need to work to create clean jobs and reduce waste where no waste is sent to landfill. So there's such an opportunity for job creation here, for workforce development programs, for saving tax dollars, and ultimately more circularity and sharing this massive material waste stream. So that's why I urge all of you to expand textile recycling outside of Refashion NYC by supporting Intro 256, and also to require the Department of Sanitation not only to conduct the feasibility study of the recycling of household textiles, but also include a full plan to implement the program, make sure that the plan includes that textiles are not shipped abroad, as Jessica also outlined, to folks of the Global South where they unjustly have to bear this burden, include nonprofit capacity building with local players to really empower folks who know their communities best, and with a plan to reuse fabric scraps and work with existing local experts, some of whom are here, and include NYCHA as part of the study. It's a long, complicated, intricate road to zero waste by 2030, but this is a critical step that would continue to position the city as a leader in climate. Thank you both for your work as well.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Leon Johnson.
Yep. Hey, Chair Abreu, my name is Christopher Leon Johnson on the record. Quick thing before I start my testimony. I was there to support the other hearing chaired by Julie Menon for the worker fatalities, and I made that clear that we need doubles invisible turnout today. We need more people to fight for this instead of just doing BS press conferences and rallies. Put the same boost to the hearings, to the public testimony. That's the only way they're going to listen. So back to the topic at hand, I want to advocate in support of the bill to make it a requirement to store e-bike batteries into proper bins. One thing that needs to start happening more is we need more education first, and the education need to be implemented in Spanish, Creole, and I'm not trying to be in more foreign languages dedicated to the African community, because these are the main ones that are doing the deliveristas, Hispanics and Africans. These are the ones doing the deliveristas. So you need to start pushing more education in these certain languages more instead of just English. That's my opinion with that. Everybody knows these are the main race, the main type of people that are delivering our food. So if you don't give them the education in their language and make it a big time priority over English, it's going to be really ineffective of a bill. One thing needs to start happening more with these storages is you need to make more public storage and more public storage for everybody, not just the deliveristas. And people need to start pushing it more to the public instead of just letting one nonprofit. And I'll make this clear. The Worker Justice Project, which is ran by Liga Galapa, which is not even a real nonprofit, telling their members to hijack all the charging stations and hijack all the bike racks. So to end this here, we need to change this up with storing into the right garbage bins. But if there's no real education and especially pushing for more languages, like Spanish and the African language, like Creole and other languages, it's going to be ineffective. It's not going to do anything. You're gonna have. I know Chair Abreu, you care about preventing more of these fires at these apartment buildings, but if you're not pushing it to the right people, you're not targeting the right people with these bills, and this is not gonna do anything. It's like you're pushing. It's like you're trying to tell someone that only speaks Spanish stuff in English. It's just pointless. So I support it, and but we need more education to the right languages.
I want to thank this panel for its testimony, and this panel is now excused.
Thank you.
On Zoom, Mary Arnold, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair Abreu. Mary Arnold, testifying for the Solid Waste Advisory Boards of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. We strongly support the passage of Intro 697, which would amend Local Law 40 of 2010. Since the passage of Local Laws 19 of 89 and 40 of 2010, 6 waste composition studies have been conducted between 1990 and 2023. Each study offers a detailed analysis of the residential waste streams, examining materials such as metal, glass, paper, textiles, and organics. These reports provide critical insights into the management of our city's waste, showing not just what materials are collected, but also why some are recycled and others are not. For instance, they reveal that Manhattan residents excel at recycling cardboard, while some Brooklyn neighborhoods lead in food scrap diversion, helping policymakers refine and improve recycling programs. Historically, these studies have tracked the rise and fall of various waste streams, such as juice boxes and phone books, and assessed the success of policy initiatives like the bans on expanded polystyrene and plastic shopping bags. In 2018, New York City used 10 billion plastic bags annually. Today, that number is dramatically reduced thanks to insights provided by these studies. Looking forward, it is crucial not only to continue these studies, but to enhance them. Future studies should present data in ways that support the elimination of non-recyclable packaging and products. By reclassifying materials into durable and non-durable categories and further segmenting durables as repairable, reusable, or reducible, we can better guide efforts toward an achievable zero waste goal, which also, to echo the last speaker, has to be supported by education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nishan?
Starting time.
Thank you, Chair Abreu. My name is Ulrike Nishan, testifying on behalf of the SWABs. The Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx, and Queens Solid Waste Advisory Boards are supportive of Intro 695 in its current form, which proposes a requirement to conduct a comprehensive study of new waste policy initiatives that would reduce the sale, distribution, and use of single-use plastic items in the city and advance environmental justice through such reductions, with 3 recommendations. First, a ban on toxic chemicals in single-use food packaging, particularly the 14 known toxics prevalent in plastics today. Second, requiring any products intended as substitutions for single-use plastic packaging also be non-toxic. Many such alternative products currently on the market contain high levels of PFAS. And lastly, banning plastics that are either difficult to recycle or for which recycling is not an economically viable option. Intro 695 would help build on New York City's legacy of reducing the use of single-use plastic materials. In the last decade, the city has instituted several initiatives that have undoubtedly contributed to New York's over 100-pound reduction in per-household aggregate annual refuse and recycling collections from 10 years ago. These initiatives include Local Law 142, which prohibits the use of single-use foam and packaging peanuts, Local Law 63, which would have banned plastic bags, later enacted as a statewide ban. Local Law 17, which prohibits restaurants and food delivery services from including silverware and other extras in takeout orders, unless customers expressly request these items. And lastly, citywide monthly plastic-free lunch day, where no single-use plastic packaging is served in cafeterias in New York City schools. These examples of materials reduction initiatives resulted in a significant reduction in the consumption of single-use plastic in New York City and prove that these efforts are not only palatable for New York City residents, they work. So thank you for holding this hearing to introduce this important bill and for your consideration today.
Thank you, Nishan, for your testimony. Seeing no more members of the public wishing to testify, this hearing is hereby adjourned.